Yeah.
Okay. In case you wonder, my background, I just been to there. It's called the Guilin. It's a beautiful area with a lot of like a small
Ah,
mountains. So yeah, it's a different kind
mm.
of landscape than you normally see. It's a very mountainous area, but it's like not very high mountain, but just huge area of different mountains.
My brother-in-law has been to Guilin and loves it very
Okay.
much. Anyway, carry
Yeah.
on, carry on.
Yeah, it's a famous place, and Hillary Clinton mentioned that in her book when she and her husband visited China.
Mm.
That's the one area they visited. But when they did back then, I think they not as well developed in terms of tourist industry as it is now. So it's very, I mean,
Mm.
it's very touristy. So, but anyway,
Mm. Yeah.
all right.
Just to say something very quickly, very, very briefly, I have
Uh-huh.
heaps of guidebooks about China up there,
Uh-huh.
which some of which I bought in the late 1980s when I had and 90s when I had plans to visit China, which alas didn't happen. I was actually learning Chinese at that time and enjoying it and making good progress, but um, things would just things became too complicated in my life. But anyway, a couple of years ago, Catherine went to China with some of these guidebooks,
Okay.
and she found that everything since then had changed completely because, of course, the
Yeah.
China of that period of the 80s
Uh-huh.
and early 90s was a completely different place. In technology and economics and industry and modernity from the China that she saw some years ago. So there we go.
Yeah. It is, I mean, even for Chinese, if you don't visit the places, like even in Beijing, for me, every time I
Mm,
visit, it's just a lot of
yeah,
things happening and
mm,
lots of things that I'm not familiar with.
yeah,
And so yeah,
yeah,
it's a country that
yeah.
I'm learning also. Okay.
Of course, and one will always learn about because, as I said, it is so interesting and so enormous.
So okay, let's look at the second term of the Trump administration. So first of all, what do you think it's
Mm.
going to be different or more or less the same as the Trump's first administration? What do you expect the second term is going to be overall?
I think it is. I think it is going to be at least what Trump wants it to be is profoundly different. I think he became president in 2016, or was elected president in 2016, unexpectedly. He hadn't really expected that he was going to win. He didn't have a team. He went to the leaders of the Republican Party. They basically picked his administration for him. He ended up with very establishment people that he didn't get on with and didn't find reliable,
Mhm.
and he's determined not to make that mistake a second time. So he's now picking all kinds of extraordinary people completely outside the standard political class to pack his administration. And I'm going to say this he, I think, is most interested in winning the political battle that he wants to wage in Washington. In other words, to break the power of the forces that defeated him in his first term. And that's why he's picking the people that he is picking.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, these people tend to be very, very right wing,
Yeah.
very much people of the grassroots
Mhm.
in other Republican Party, Tea Party people. And um, though they are very loyal to Trump and
Mhm.
will probably support him in fighting these various, four-letter agents and all of those things in Washington itself. They also have views on China and Iran,
Mhm. Mhm.
which I find extremely concerning. So I think that's the trouble. I don't think he's. I think he's principally focused on Washington. But for China and Iran, this is going to be a very, very difficult time, though I think China is going to be able to navigate this problem quite successfully.
Yeah, as you can imagine, all his nominees are closely watched in China, of course. So let's start with Marco Rubio. I have to say, I was surprised when they picked
Yeah.
Marco Rubio. I don't feel like he has much of a depth or experience. But in China, here's how they explain. I mean, some people on X also pointed out the reason he picked Marco Rubio was because Marco Rubio was very much backed by the Adelson money, Adelson family. They seem to strongly supported him from the beginning when he first time run for president. And certainly he didn't, obviously he didn't win. So Adelson shifted their support to Trump. But they has always been supporting Marco Rubio. Seems like that's their guy. And so now they push him forward, having, been given Trump $100 million or something. So now they push him forward, I guess, because they probably want to see him to succeed Trump in a way or something. So that's how he got this position, Secretary of State. But in any event, this clearly is, to me, is a big disappointment because Marco Rubio is very anti-China. And not to mention, he's on the sanctions list by the Chinese government, which means in principle, he cannot go to China for now. What do you say about, the situation here?
I think that is exactly correct. I think he's a bad choice for Secretary of State. I mean, I absolutely would not have wanted him as Secretary of State in any conceivable shape or form. By the way, I also think that Mike Waltz, who's the new National Security Advisor, he also seems to have very disturbing views about China. I think you're absolutely right. I think the Chinese are absolutely right about Marco Rubio. He's very much the kind of person the donors wanted to see, the establishment wants to see. And for that reason, especially given the very, very eccentric, or shall we say, unusual choice of other people to fill other positions in the Department of Justice, in the intelligence community, in those sort of places, I think that Trump probably felt that he had to pick someone acceptable to the donors and to the establishment in order to cover his base, cover his positions, at least to some extent. But the problem with that is that you're going to put Rubio in charge of the State Department. I don't think he's going to change his views. I don't think he's incapable of changing his views. He's going to be as ferociously anti-China as it's possible to be. He's going to be as supportive of Taiwan as it's possible to be. And if Trump isn't very careful, he's going to lead Trump and the United States into many, many problems. So I think it was a bad choice. I think it's one that Trump is going to pay a price for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, more or less the Chinese media agrees. His national security advisor pick is also a China hawk, Michael Waltz, and also the Homeland Security pick, Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem is very famous in China because she had one interview with Maria Bartiromo. She was talking. She said that China has 2,000-year plan to destroy this country, meaning United States. She has that. So that footage, was for a while, was all over the place in China.
What 2,000 years going back to the Han Dynasty? they were plotting it then. They are very, very prescient people, the Chinese. or is it 2,000 years from now? I mean, it seems the most extraordinary. I have to say that's one of the most surreal things I have ever heard. It demonstrates the level of paranoia that exists in the United States, that a comment like that could possibly be made. I mean, that astonishes me. But there we go. No, but there you go. I mean, that is the trouble. All of these people, there's a kind of folk wisdom on the folk. It's not wisdom, of course. A folk sort of law on the far right, on the kind of people, as I said, who Trump is appointing because they have been his core electoral base and he feels that they're loyal to him. The problem is that all of these people, I mean, they have this absolutely crazy view, in my opinion, of China. I mean, they think that they do see China in these extraordinary terms. And as I said, all of these people, Trump may be appointing them because he wants their loyalty in taking on the bureaucracy in Washington, but unfortunately they come with all this baggage, and they believe in all of this. I mean, that's the trouble, and they're going to lead him, as I said, they potentially are going to lead him into many problems.
Yeah. One place I was looking at is, of course, Israel, the Middle East policies. So on top of the people he picked, Marco Rubio openly said he doesn't believe in like a two-state solution. He doesn't want a ceasefire. He said that. And on top of that, Mike Huckabee was the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Again, does not believe in two-state solution. And Elisa Stefanik, UN ambassador to U.S. ambassador to UN, she's a staunch supporter of Israel, a Zionist, etc. So all these people, on top of the fact that are very hawkish against China, they seems also very hawkish in terms of the Israel Middle East policy. Is that so?
Oh, there's no doubt about this at all. And here, by the way, I'm afraid I think they also reflect Trump's own feelings. I mean, he has always been very pro-Israel. Netanyahu has been his personal friend. I remember seeing photographs of Trump's office in Trump Tower, and it was full of Jewish and Israeli there was the candlestick and all of those things there. He clearly has a very strong identification with Israel, and I think, I mean, I said all of these other people, I think some of them he's picking in order to fight internal battles in Washington. But that doesn't apply to Huckabee or Stefanik. She's at the UN. He's going to be in Jerusalem. They're not there to fight the bureaucracy in Washington. They are there to pursue his policies, which are going to be extremely pro-Israel at this very dangerous time in the Middle East. And again, I don't know whether Trump understands that, but this could potentially lead him into a war in the Middle East against Iran, and he was going to find that war an absolute disaster for himself if he lets that happen. But I think that there is a real possibility that he will. I think on China, he might just pull back. But on the Middle East, I'm much. I mean, as I said, I think his visceral feelings are very clear on this issue.
So, do you think it's possible that the U.S. will get into a war with Iran? Because that's ultimately many of these people want. They do want to have a war with Iran.
Yeah.
Do you think with Trump,
absolutely,
they will get that?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you something else. Another thing that is very visible here is that a lot of the people that are rising now at the new defense secretary, whose name Hegseth, or I can never get it right, Hegseth, Mike Waltz, by the way, Gabbard as well. They are all former middle-ranking military officers who have served in the Middle East. And this applies to Gabbard as well, by the way. What they all are is, yes, they are against forever wars and that kind of thing, because they saw the effect of that. They're also very hostile to Islamic movements, jihadist movements. And they conflate those movements to a great extent with Iran, which is a real problem. I mean, they've never really understood that Iran is not allied to these movements, but is opposed to them. And of course, those who served in Iraq will have come up against the Iranians there, because the Iranians were very active and are very active in Iran to this day. And they've developed from that a further feeling of hostility and rivalry towards Iran. So I'm sorry to say this, but I think that there's a real possibility that these people are going to agitate to back Israel in a confrontation, a military confrontation with Iran, which will be a disaster.
See, I I have to say I'm disappointed because maybe I shouldn't be expecting so much because I agree with you. I think his second term will be different from his first term. I think he's
Mm, mm,
matured a lot over the past, I would say, 4 years in
mm.
particular. I think he's more confident, and I do believe he's a person actually do not want to have wars with everybody. And in that case, I
Yeah.
was thinking that he would have some mild, people who are more soft on all these fronts. But seems to me like the only country, the only war they are against, it seems like is Ukraine war. That seems like where he's going to find a
That's
solution. He's going to try to find a solution to end it. But in terms of in the Middle East and with China, and possibly, I don't know, Marco Rubio is very much against Venezuela as well in South America.
yeah.
So it seems all other places, it's going to be the same old, same old. Is that what's going to happen?
That is exactly what I think is the danger, and I would not be surprised at all if that is exactly what we ended up seeing. Um, now, again, Trump has matured, and he has become an awful lot more experienced, and he's learned that in Washington, loyalty is a very important thing. But he's going for ultra loyalists who, as I said, come with all these views.
Yeah.
And this is so disappointing because there are so many other people in the United States who would help him stabilize the international system. And you could find lots of people like that, people who are eminent and reasonable and wise. On the Duran, we recently interviewed George Beebe, who was a former top CIA analyst. He also thinks that the Ukraine thing has been horribly mishandled. He
Yeah.
understands that the United States is overextended. There's people like Eldridge Colby, who was formerly in the Pentagon. We've discussed Professor Mearsheimer on
Mhm.
many occasions, who could certainly be somebody. You wouldn't appoint him to the administration, but you could seek him out and get advice from him. You could find all kinds of people like that. And unfortunately, what has happened is that Trump has gone against the establishment neocons, which is the people he ran with in his first term, and he's now going with the anti-establishment neocons, even though they're also neocons. In fact, they're even more extreme neocons than the other ones. And of course, you're quite right. They have a kind of soft spot for Russia. They
Yeah.
don't have the same animus towards Russia
Mhm.
that the established neocons do. Because, and I'm going to say it bluntly, I'm going to say this to your Chinese viewers, because Russia is a white Christian
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
I think that is the fundamental difference. But, you know, one can applaud the result in the sense that we're likely to see less of a war in Ukraine. Uh, but unfortunately, they're incredibly dangerous in every other place.